Hi guys. So last week I asked you all to choose a topic for a persuasive speech that you could deliver, and I gave you some ideas for topics you could choose. And I asked you to use this sentence stem, we have a moral duty to, and then finish that sentence with something you feel really passionately about that we should all do. So I gave you some potentials you could choose from. Moral duty to stand against racism, protect our environment, be kind, protect the rights of members of the LGBTQ community, eliminate homelessness in the UK. So you may have devised your own. If not, you were asked to pick one of these and use it to complete the sentence here. I then asked you, once you had generated a statement, so you'd come up with a task, a concept, if you like, for a persuasive speech, to plan it. And I went through with you in the last week's sessions the steps of planning your speech. And it's really important to plan first. You need to have a sense of ideas of things you're going to include, or else it'll end up sounding rubbish. So please can you get out any notes and plans you made last week, because they're going to use them this week. Because this week's session is all about taking those plans and ideas and actually writing it into a speech. So this week's a bit different because I haven't broken it into 4 separate sessions. I'm just going to deliver this as one big tutorial. And what I'd like you to do is to use this week of lessons to complete about 3 to 4 hours on it to get your own speech written. Okay? So I have written a speech, I will read it to you, and I will explain to you what I have done to make it an effective speech, and then I will ask you to use some of the things I've talked you through to write your own. So it'll be very much, here's an example I've written, here's what makes it good, now you practice and write your own. Obviously, as you write paragraphs, email them to your English teacher so they can give you advice and feedback on what you've done. Alternatively, you might prefer to get the whole thing written and then send it to your English teacher. But it is imperative, hugely important, that you send what you write to your English teacher for checking and feedback, because this does form part of your GCSE course and your future grading. So it's absolutely essential that you work through the lessons, work through the slides, write your speech and send it to your teacher for advice and feedback before we go on to the next set of lessons next week. Okay, so what you may recall that I had taken the sentence stem, we have a moral duty to, and I'd finished it with the words, end child labour across the world. And I have planned, I've done a lot of research online into child labour. I've watched some videos, learned about some real life stories, different types of child labour. So now I feel really well prepared to write my speech. So last week I also introduced you to the speech structure. So I'm going to follow this format. I'm going to have 6 sections to my speech. Some sections will just be as little as a sentence or 2. Some sections will be 2 or 3 paragraphs. But I am going to write 6 sections of a persuasive speech arguing that we have a moral duty to stand against child labour. The first section I'm going to write is my character paragraph. In this section, it's all about creating ethos. I'm not going to go into great depth about the topic of child labour. I'm going to introduce it so people know why I'm stood there, but mostly I'm going to focus on creating an appealing impression of myself. I'm going to greet my audience and I'm going to tell a relevant anecdote, a short story. So 3 things I need to do: try to make the audience like me, to welcome them and greet them, and to tell a relevant little story. So this is what I've written. Good morning, and thank you for joining me today. I am lucky to have been born in a country in which child labour was abolished over 100 years ago, a country in which education for all is taken for granted. I have lost count of how many times I have moaned about going to school, complained because the lesson is too boring, or because I don't want to get out of bed so early. But my complaints are clearly absurd when you consider the number of children who would cherish the opportunity to learn. Instead, they are forced to work in dangerous and unsuitable jobs with little help of a prosperous future. I would like to start by telling you a story, a true story. It's the story of Alejandra. Alejandra is only 12 years old, but every day she is woken up at 4 in the morning by her father. She does not go to school, but goes to collect curlews, small mollusks in the mangrove swamps on the island of Espiritu Santo in El Salvador. Alejandra spends 14 hours each day in the mangrove swamp, without shoes, facing bad weather, mosquito bites, cuts and scrapes, from having to pull the curlies out from deep in the mud. She earns very little. If she is lucky, in one day, Alejandra manages to collect 2 baskets of curlies, about 150 shells, worth little more than 12 colones or $1.40. Alejandra, who has 7 younger brothers and sisters, has no time to go to school or play with other children, but she never complains. I've never met Alejandra and I never will, but her story is no less devastating than if I knew her personally. She is not a remote figure. She is a real human being who deserves a childhood and an education. I might be one of the lucky ones, but I'm not blind to the suffering of others. Okay, so that's my first draft, and there might be things I improve later. There might be things you already think could be better, but I'm happy enough with it as my first draft. So please could you answer these questions. You can either obviously rewind the video a little bit to pause it, but it's probably easier if you open the PDF document on Show My Homework, and then you can have the copy of my opening on your screen, and then you can answer the questions. Just make a note of the answers in your books, please. So pause the video, answer the questions, and then restart the video. Okay, so hopefully you could see lots of things I've done here. So straight away, I've started by greeting my audience. It's really simple. Good morning, and thank you for joining me. It's a speech. I need to engage with people and be nice. Then the next paragraph, then I really get into trying to establish my ethos. And what I've tried to do here is to recognise my privilege as a human being. And obviously I've used a bit of anadiplosis here. I am lucky to have been born in a country. I've deliberately done that. I've ended the sentence with the word lucky, and then I've restarted the next sentence with the same word. Anadiplosis, but in this case I want to draw attention to that word because I want to get it across as a fundamental part of my ethos. And obviously I then go in to explain why I'm lucky. Because I was born in the UK, a country where there isn't child labour, where I have gone to school. I've then followed that up with an anecdote. And it's really a bit of sort of self-depreciation. Self-depreciation means putting yourself down. And I've kind of used an anecdote in a way which isn't very favourable of me, because it suggests that I've moaned and complained about things I should actually consider myself lucky for. But I've done that because I want to show that I'm not perfect. I'm not preaching at you. Actually, I don't always appreciate everything I've got. But also, I realise that I'm in the wrong. So all of it is trying to create a relationship with the audience. I'm not here to preach at you and tell you you're a bad person. I'm the same as you. But actually, we should look and see just how lucky we are compared with lots of children all over the world. Now, I obviously then move on to Alejandra, a story of, I could have chosen multiple stories. This one seemed particularly tragic to me. And this really just creates a contrast with my anecdote about myself. The story of a child of 12 years old woken at 4 in to work in this dangerous job is really tragic. And although it may seem that it's more of a pathos section than ethos, I feel that by including this, it shows that I care. It shows that I know about somebody, that I've taken the time to find out about someone else's life. So I've included it in the ethos section because I think it really helps to project myself as a credible, caring human. And obviously that's something I've tried to reinforce at the end here. Okay, so now we've had a chance to look at mine and to consider how I've written an opening, I'd like you to practice. I'd like you to write the ethos, the character/opening of your speech. Whatever statement you created last week, we all have a moral duty too. You can now write the actual opening of your speech. And as I said before, it doesn't have to be perfect. I don't think mine's perfect. It's a first draft. You can use similar structures to me. You can use anadiplosis to open. You can include a story about somebody. You can use as much or as little as mine as you want to. But what I want to do, by the time you get to the end of your first section, I should know what you're talking about and I should like you. I should feel that you're somebody who's worth listening to because you're a decent person. Okay, and that's what we're aiming to achieve in this section. So please write that. If you feel you want to email it to your English teacher for advice and feedback, please do. If not, put it to one side once you've finished it and go on to video 2, please, because that is the end of video 1.